Neil just texted me, and he didn't know if it was 5:30 or 6, so he's probably going to be on his way, but we can go ahead and start. Okay, welcome to our board retreat for Tuesday, July 11th. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Craig, is he coming or not?
I don't think he is.
Okay. Mr. Estheimer?
Present.
Mr. Freitas is on his way. Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Koopser?
Here.
Ms. Reed?
Present.
Dr. Pomponio?
Here. Okay. So we can go ahead and get into the workshop. We don't need a Pledge of Allegiance for the retreat. Okay. These are some of the topics that the board members had mentioned to be on the board retreat. So usually if we don't get through all of the topics, we can continue on another date and time. So right now the agenda goes through 8 items, and we are going to review the halfway point for the board, short-term and long-term goals and issues and topics. Okay, at this point we can start with number 1, half-point review of the board responsibilities and direction. I sent everyone a copy of the board self-assessment. Were you able to review the items on that? Okay, typically we review our self-assessment at the end of the year. So if you can use that template as a guide for items that you talk about, assess, or ask for information, or review for yourself and other board members, how we can improve or what items to talk about. I'll add more information on that when we can get together and review, when we can take that. Once that board self-assessment is open to the board, each board member has an opportunity to take the self-assessment, and the last person, once they go online, it's an online review through MASB. There's 7 days before that closes, but every member has to participate and take the board self-assessment before it closes. So more information to come on that. And also for classes that the board should be taking, per policy, the board members should all have 100 series courses within their first, or by the end of their first year on the board. I know that Mr. Green has, Mr. Green, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish it.
Okay, I know that Mr. Green and Mr. Estheimer, and I believe Mr. Koopser has.
Mr. Craig has signed up for
Mr.
some,
Craig, okay. So that's one thing I wanted to review, because it's important to take some classes to get some of that information for how we view our role and the responsibilities as a board member. And Ms. Reed, I know, has her classes as well. So is there any questions on things that we've done so far to this point?
Madam President?
Mr. Green?
I just want to make it a point, so for you and the viewing audience and everybody to know that whereas the agreement to finish the board 100 level classes in our first year, it still remains difficult to do so when classes aren't being offered in the area. Mackinac City was the last one, which is an awful long jaunt for a weekend. As I just looked online, there are only 6 of the 10 classes, or I'm sorry, 5 of the 10 classes. One has been pulled back. And I talked to Mary McCarthy. They're being revised. When they're done, she doesn't know. But for the classes to even be done online, there's only half of them that are available. So if by some chance we don't get it done at the end of the year, it's really at it's at the disposal of the MASB to get us some classes more local, or that might not be feasible, and we can get them done as soon as we are able.
Okay, and that's good input, because what I can add to that is with the MAS, or Wayne County Association of School Boards, we've had continuous discussion on this to add local classes from MASB, and they're in the works of doing that, I think, with Trenton for next year. But we're working on that, and we're continuously talking about that, because one of the downsides to, or the struggles to, or the challenges to get the 100 series completed is that not all of them are online, And then the other, most of them are in Lansing, so that's a big distance. And then viewing the schedule only a few times a year. So realize that's a challenge with the prior board. We set that policy because it's good to have just the basic knowledge, but with that understanding, we can review it again with the organizational meeting in January. Any other questions with number 1?
Again, Madam President, this question, Teresa, is if per se we don't use our allotted $7,000 because of this situation where we can't get the classes, is there going to be, or do you foresee a possibility of a, rollover into the budget next year for us to finish these classes? You understand what I'm saying?
Right. It's not a rollover, but the same amount will be put into the budget in the following year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that leads me to another question. I know that MASB has the school board courses, and the Wayne County Association has workshops and things like that at no fee. Is there any other opportunities? I know that there was one with technology that I took advantage of in downtown. So if there's any other opportunities too for the board, school-wise or related to school?
I'll keep my eye out,
Okay.
and my husband's on our local school board, so sometimes he
Right.
shares things with me too,
Right.
so I'll keep my eye out for it.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay. Moving on to number 2, board officer descriptions and duties. This is something that pretty much always gets discussed and reopened at the board retreat because there's questions about what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do. But this item I have here for attorney opinion and resolution outlining board president duties, that's in addition to the officer duties. So I would like to table 2A for a special meeting later.
Madam President, I will concur. I think after talking to a few people, I think we have some things with this opinion that aren't quite understood. And at this point, without a full board, with the Vice President not being here either, I would agree with you that I don't think this is an issue to tackle today.
Yeah. Okay, do we need a approval on that, or do you need to vote on that, or?
On the
no?
table? No.
Okay.
No, I think that we can get in a consensus, an
If we have a
agreement. that we
consensus
think
of a
that's fine,
table,
but
that's it, yeah.
there's no actions being taken, so
Okay.
I agree, it's probably a good idea. Let's hold off on that particular topic, though there's more representation of the full board, and maybe as we understand what the recommendations as it relates to the attorney's opinion, and is that protected for Open Meetings Act as well, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have the discussion open on the floor for board officer descriptions and duties. Currently, the description for board president duties is listed in the board policies, but it's vague. So the resolution, I think, expands a little bit on that. So that's part of my description is going to be held off for that discussion. So is there any other discussion on secretary duties? Vice President isn't here, but any other duties that you want to comment on, being a new board member?
Can Teresa give me a stamp? Yeah.
He wants a stamp. Can't do that.
Secretary stamp.
I tried.
So it's my understanding, and as reading the reference manuals that were provided to us as new board members when we came on, and there were roles and descriptions and responsibilities within that was related to the policy. Did we want to take a look at those descriptions as the way they are in that reference manual and discuss any agreement, disagreement, or changes with that? And again, I'm sorry, I didn't bring that book with me.
Yeah.
But there was a large binder that talked about officer roles and responsibilities that were with that.
I guess the main thing was to get it open for discussion in case there was any additions or things that you felt that were...
The information that is in the binder, and I'm doing this from memory too, I believe is what we took from the MASB site, that are just general descriptions, but I would have to have that binder in front of me to look through that whole section again.
Do you think this might be a topic that we can discuss
In a work
in
session?
conjunction with the?
Oh, definitely,
you
yeah,
know,
that can be part of
We'll
that.
do all the officer roles at one time,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
You okay with that, Mr. Cooper?
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to have a point of reference so that we're not just kind of talking from what we think it is, but there's
Right.
actually something in
I'm
writing.
prepared with something.
And if it's too vague or it's too detailed, if we're going to make an edit of sorts of that we think should or shouldn't be, as we discuss those roles and responsibilities, just something we could start from, because I know it's out there. That's all I was saying.
And there is a board policy that is a very brief description of the officer duties.
And that's the reason why it was brought to discussion, because throughout the several months, I know that Rebecca has sent some information regarding board role, and sometimes it has to be, reinforced, because sometimes it's forgotten, or if you're a board member, you're not fully aware of what that is or what the responsibilities are.
And as it was mentioned, it's very vague.
It
in the
is, it
description,
is.
So it'd be nice to focus down on that,
Right.
I think, at a different meeting.
I also would like to believe that it's written probably from MASB in a vague manner and purposefully, as well as there could be some room for interpretation on it. I know after a couple of the meetings in which we've had, I went and referenced it, and I've read it and reread it a couple of times. And it was hard to put my teeth into something that was real solid because it was so vague, trying to understand that. So maybe we can talk about what that interpretation may be as to that's there, and if we need more clarity, we can maybe edit that.
Well, as a halfway point, you as the board treasurer, do you feel like that description fits what you're doing as a treasurer?
Yes, but again, in a vague way. So it's kind of like it's kind of broadly encompassing about the budget and having committee meetings, and it just, yes, but I don't know if I need to get more specific at this point. And again, I want to go back to that reference of it. It was just, to Ms. Creason's point, it was brief in the document. So,
That's why we pretty much put it on the agenda,
yeah.
just so we can.
I'm sorry I didn't bring it.
No, like I said, we pretty much put it on the agenda at the retreats to talk about it openly and see if there's anything that needs to be revised, because it is, different school year. Over the years, sometimes things need to be changed. Okay, board role, I guess that kind of fits in with the other officer descriptions, because we just talked about board role.
When we talk about that in the future, or how far out are we talking? And when we would want to do that as a work session
Yeah.
after one of our future board meetings? When are we looking to, just so that we're all well prepped, I suppose, is a question.
That would be a good idea to, at this point, like I said, it's a halfway point. I guess as a board member here for several years, I thought it was a good idea to put it on the agenda to see where you guys are at and, what your opinion is of the past several months, of being a board member. Do we need to work from people who have been here for a while, or do you have other views, opinions? Do you want to have MASB come in and do a workshop? I mean, I'm basically wanting to know if you guys, need more assistance.
I think that at our last workshop, I believe that we discussed, changing up sort of the secretary role and who makes motions. I think that we sort of handled that a little bit, and I think that that's going kind of well. So I think that, as far as tackling the specific positions, I know that for sure the secretary position is something that we've handled. Vice president, president, and treasurer are the ones that we really haven't gotten into too much. So I'm not sure specifically on those roles and responsibilities other than what we already know.
Okay.
But if we're already going to be going into detail on the president
That's
position,
it.
maybe it might be a good, we can have the documentation to sort of review the policy as it stands now, and then
Right.
make a decision if we want to go into detail or purposefully keep it vague, so we can, it'd be open for a little bit more interpretation and discussion. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we might need a purposeful description of
Right.
what those
Yeah, I
roles are
agree.
too. Okay.
I personally find that, and this is bringing to topic 7, not to jump too far ahead in terms of things, it says review committees, procedure. It says create agenda minutes and what should encompass each. I'd say that the treasurer role, from what I've experienced thus far, has been very tied to the finance committee work in terms of the responsibilities. So I guess that, and I don't know, I'm just talking, I guess. I don't know what point I'm getting at. In terms of what direction we've had as an officer position for at least the treasurer spot, I think that we've come down a path with that particular committee, the finance committee, but with the treasurer role in terms of running that, on looking into the purpose of those finance committees and where we're heading with them, taking a look at what are the parts of the budget and making a purposeful effort into deep diving different portions of it. And I think that has become more of a, what is the purpose of that committee, what is the purpose of that, and what can the treasurer do to help facilitate that? And that, I think that's become part of that role. And I'll learn more as it continues as to which areas and get input from the board as to where we should be looking into the budget itself to gain deeper understanding how I could share that. But I'm finding that as a part of the officer role that it's kind of evolved a little bit with to that, especially as it relates specifically to the finance committee. So they're very married in my mind between the treasurer and the finance committee.
Yeah, and we didn't have that committee for a long time, but that's where we placed the treasurer. But again, that role is vague in the policy manual. Okay. Other board activities. Establishing procedures for the operation of the board. That's one of our goals, one of our board goals. So that's probably going to be a work session or a special meeting, because I tried to put together a matrix for the district, because we need to look at the whole district, and I think we talked about that too, as far as where we need to focus and what processes are working, what processes aren't working. So I think we can set that one aside for a special meeting, because that's going to need to just focus alone on that one. Any questions on that? Any comments on that goal?
In what aspect, Madam President, are we talking about board operations? What's our end goal here? What are we looking at to evaluate? I mean, are we reinventing the wheel, certain parts that we don't like? Are there certain things that we have that we want to take a look at to see if we want to make some changes and have an open discussion? I mean, where's the parameters that we're dealing with here? That's an awful broad topic.
We discussed this in our board goals conversation. Going by what you said, you mentioned having reports and having the directors report
Absolutely.
to us.
Yeah, that's later on, right.
That's part of the process. So that's kind of, I'm just putting things here.
Right,
I didn't
I get
get a
it.
lot of feedback, so I'm adding something here for us to, we have to have a discussion and kind of review. So I'm leaving it open for anyone to chime in.
Can we move the D? Can I chime in on D while we're at it, just moving forward?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, one of the things I think.
If there's
I
no
think this is-
questions.
I'm sorry.
there's no other
I
questions.
personally, yeah, if I could for a minute, I think that they're really two different topics there. The board performance there is probably with our self-evaluation. I think that's a topic into itself, and board operations is kind of how, are we following Robert's Rule of Order? How are we in the spirit of how we're trying to make group decision-making? Roles and operations in that manner. I think that those would be kind of, in my mind, kind of two different topics. One is how are we doing operationally, and the other one is how effective are we as in terms of our performance evaluation.
And on that note too, Mr. Coops, I agree, but, Robert Rules, with all due respect, and I know this is not the most popular statement, I've made this before, is nothing more than a recommendation on how to run a meeting. And if we're going to follow Robert's rules, one thing I've seen in 6 months is we follow parts of Robert's rules when we want to, and then other parts we dismiss. So if we're going to do it, we need to either be all in or we need to be all out. We can't be picking and choosing and cherry picking what we want to use and what we don't want to use. So shoring up that process, I would agree with 100%.
What are areas we don't follow?
procedures when we table things sometimes, or when people are being, supposedly, when can, there's disagreements on when someone is being told they have to vote or not vote, or when, we have discussions after a session, after a discussion is closed. We've done that in this group, not just one person. Not just one person. I've been guilty of it. First one to admit it. I've been guilty of not following the rule. But, a few of us have done it, and maybe that's some of us being the greenhorns, being new, that have made that mistake. But if we keep coming back to Robert's rules, and I've heard that a lot, then let's either really hammer it home and do it, or figure out another procedure and stay consistent with it. That's my point.
Well, I know that being on the board for several years, observing initially and then watching the different changes of board members, it's been a trial and error because there's been a
For sure.
turnover. But, and again, with people with not a specific, pattern of experiences, it's going to be touch and go, and it's always a learning curve there. So, that's my experience with it. But yeah, we can always focus on it and talk about it.
That's basically what I was trying to get at. One being, again, operations to that point, and performance based on our self-evaluation. Really two different areas.
Madam President,
Mr. Green?
if we move to D, this was my recommendation, as you mentioned previously, and to give some direction maybe to the superintendent so they know, instead of being so vague. My idea is a review of report, and I think Mr. Coops, or you and I have spoken on this subject also at great length at different times, a review of reports for all departments annually. Now, this isn't to mean, and I want to make it clear, that I expect would expect seven departments to come here every month, and we would be here till midnight. And I like to watch baseball games during the summer, so that is not going to be the case. But my suggestion was, or an idea was, and I'll open this up to the powers to be, the board, superintendent, finance director, is that if we can rotate the major, the athletics, the buildings and grounds, the food service, instead of getting something after or only when we need something approved, or getting something at the end, every 3 months or 4 months to rotate a report. And it doesn't have to be, maybe it can just be to fill us in exactly where we're at. So we're being proactive of what's going on, and we're keeping abreast, and we're seeing the faces of the directors and the people that are in charge of these programs at intervals to see what's going on, instead of once a year or once every 6 months when we're approving something, or if something goes astray.
That sounds great, and I had a conversation with Ms. Cretion, and I actually realized that with all the departments that we have, the programs that I'd like to see, and like JROTC, I wanted to see them come. There's contractual agreement that keeps them from coming. They're out of town. So it sounds great, and we can schedule it in throughout the year, but it's not always going to happen.
Right, but I think departments and programs are different. A department, I'm talking,
the major ones?
The major departments. I mean, when we're talking band or junior ROTC or whatever, and no disrespect to the band, I'm just throwing that out there, but the band is really, they're under our auspice, but they're not. They have their own 503C. They have their own organizational laws by law, and if they violate something, then they have to answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have to answer to the powers to be. So, I don't expect the band director coming in here giving us a report, for example, I'm talking about our major departments, our human resource director, so forth and so on.
Mr. Green, there are 7 directors, and I'm assuming that that's what you're talking about, but I want to make sure, so that would be HR, curriculum, finance, food service, special education, latchkey, and technology. Some of these are required by board policy to give a report annually. So knowing that there are 7 directors, and some of them have to be here annually by policy, I think that my remaining question was, would you like to see all 7 of them once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, because I'll have to schedule that in. I know one of the things that we need to talk about is the calendar, and in the past, we've attempted to place some of those into the calendar. It's hard to know that far ahead when that would actually make sense. So maybe as a part of this discussion, when the board decides what kind of information you would like from the directors and how frequently, we could determine who that list is, what the frequency is, and rather than us trying to place them on the calendar a year ahead, I just know that I need to schedule them in a sensible way when they're available and when they may have important information to share with the board. That's one way that we could do that. The one other one that appears on here that isn't, we in the past have done transportation, but that's not, we don't have a transportation director. That's Trinity that provides our transportation. And so I don't know if you would also want to include in these reports asking Trinity to come, asking DM Burr to come. There's a lot of other third-party contractors too, so.
Madam
So-
President?
Oh, Mr. Cribser.
Thank you for bringing this up, Mr. Green. Yes, I think you hit it well on the head of what we were discussing in terms of, and it was something that I had also proposed as one of the board goals, is to try and have a better touch, feel, understanding of what the work's being done within the departments. I'm not saying that we have the right answer in terms of, I want to see everybody at least once a year. I think that the cadence is a little more frequent than that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
See each director once a year. I think that the cadence would be a little more frequent than that, but I think that some of them, it would be department by department in terms of, such as the curriculum. It seems as though we get probably a presentation on that at least 3 to 6 times a year, and somewhere in that time frame. It seems like Jill's presenting to us fairly frequently.
Well, and let me address that, because this could be a time when the board may or may not want to change that. At one time, the curriculum director was an assistant superintendent position, which is maybe how that came to be, that those occur more frequently. So as we, I mean, you see how we've done it in the past. If we need to get more people in here more often, it might mean that we don't need to have the curriculum director report at almost every board meeting. That is certainly one thing that we have an option. So thinking about all those directors, what kind of information would you like in total, and how often would you like it?
I'm just saying that I personally would want to see it more than once a year, for sure, from each of the directors. That's all in my personal opinion, and therefore they wouldn't have to be as exhaustive of reporting potentially. But the cadence would be determined by the need of the department to get opinion from the board as well, such as the Mrs. McLaughlin. She's at least 3 to 4 times a year with her budget reports and presentations. Absolutely needed, you know. Maybe somebody else might, food services, maybe it's just twice a year, you know, type of thing.
Well, there's times when they're required to
Yeah.
report something, and that would be curriculum, because she's also in charge of federal and state grants and programs. So there's, in addition to just a regular reporting, that she would be required to come to the board, because there's information that by law we have to report to the board, the same as food service. The meeting on the 18th is some things that are required by law to be done. So set those aside. The things that we have to report as directors to the board by law, you can just set those aside, because those are going to happen anyway. So just for information or updates, again, my question is, if you can settle on a frequency and generally the kind of information that you might want from everybody. They can just put their own information together, but if you have a specific set of questions, then we would need to develop those.
Mr. Green.
I guess I would ask Mr. Freitas, Ms. Reed, and yourself, Dr. Pomponio, as senior members of the board, where you think the frequency would be. Personally, I would think, off the top of my head, I would like something quarterly maybe, and if we could scale back on it, we could. Once every 4 months from
Point of
someone,
order.
at least to hear from them.
For
Mrs.
discussion.
Reed.
I think for those that were brought up, I think mid-year, closer to holidays is good. Where are we at? What are we seeing? And then at the end of the year in July, say, or June or July, so that we hear, well, how effective was this? Did these kinks actually get worked out? What's the plan moving forward? So like the first time they present, it should be by everybody's in the swing of things, but we're seeing these issues. And then at the end, it's, well, we resolved these issues and maybe found these new ones. And oh, by the way, here are some questions to ask. And that would maybe be effective in things like finding out that we weren't going to throw a bid out for pizza. We wouldn't have known that if we didn't have a wrap up. Like if he would have came just in the middle of the year. So quarterly, I don't know, but I think that if we did that, and then if ever we have a question, you know, we can always see if someone has time to come in on a specific topic. But those 2 times a year, it seems like that's when we get the most information.
I like that halfway and end of the year. I would ask that you have a little more discussion about the end of year, knowing that we have school improvement reports that take up all of April and May, and then in June we're to the budget. The directors, for the most part, don't work in July, and so that July and August are not always, although the directors do report back as part of the administrative team about the 3rd week in August. So we could certainly ask them to do some kind of end of year report once they report back to work in August. My concern would be that June, we're back to really lengthy meetings. Quarterly, that would be every 3 months, and with seven directors every 3 months, you'd have 2 directors. I mean, that would be a lot of reporting to try to do it quarterly.
I would agree with quarterly is too much, but mid-year would be, I think, sufficient. But I'd also like to see athletics in there as well.
It's one of the 7 major.
Well, it's not normally considered. That's a halftime athletic director, halftime. Because then we also have a vocational director, halftime, and halftime assistant principal. I don't normally include those, but I can add, if you want the athletic director and the vocational director, then I can add those two in there also. Then we're up to 9, and then. Again, the mid-year is going to be very spread out, because mid-year with, again, you know, I look at, like in January, we have our organizational meeting and those sorts of things. It's going to have to be spread over several months mid-year. Otherwise, there's just no way that we can get all of this accomplished with all the other board business that goes on.
And I agree with the twice a year, just as a check for the start of the year and the end of the year, what times of the month that can be open. But part of where I felt that there was a need was there was a pretty big discussion on the wheat bid and the bread bid or the pizza bid, and we had a large discussion on the other food items, and this just happened to come out with the extension for the one pizza bid that we had. So if we didn't know about that, that was something that the board was concerned about at that time. So I think 2 times a year would be good.
And as it comes down, we might want to say certain directors we'd like to see more quarterly. Depends how it's going. We can always come back and revisit that.
Like ROTC, I can't see anything more than a one-time, this is what's going on in ROTC. You know, I don't see a mid-year and then a follow-up. We pretty much get what you get. But then I'd like to plug in other things, like I think it would be great, since I've been here, we've never had a little presentation on our nature center. And it is like a student favorite. The kids are doing so much back there. It's a huge point of pride for the high school. It would give a little bit more, you know, oomph for one of our science programs. So like stuff like that, I'd like to hear give some shouts out for some of those teachers and programs that have that little extra special stuff too.
So let's come back to programs, because that's a whole long list of things. We have board meetings, we also have committee meetings, and I don't know if this is helpful for any of these reports to be done through the committee meetings. That's another opportunity. Not everybody is, those aren't full board meetings either. I'm this is growing into a lot of board meeting time, which is fine, but there's also a lot of business during the school year.
So out of the 7 directors, who are required?
Added 2 more.
How many are required for the year out of the directors?
By
Right now, how many do we-
by policy, nobody is required to be here. It's just by practice. The finance director always attends all the board meetings. I don't know of any board meeting where the finance director doesn't attend all of the meetings.
But you said for like title money and grant money that there has to be a report
Well,
annually from
some of them have to come, there are things that have to be reported to the board. So one example would be the report card results. Those have to be reported. At this point in time, that happens to be the responsibility of the curriculum director. So when that happens, that person is going to be here. There's any number of other things that come up when they occur in our district, and they don't always occur in our district. For example, there's a required report that's going to have to be made by Kelly Thomas, the Director of Special Services. And it's not something that happens every year, it's something that happens right now, and she's going to be required to report that to the Board of Education, and that'll happen, I don't know, probably August. We haven't scheduled that yet. So those are rotating things.
So, Mr. Koopser.
Thank you. And I hear your point of what you're saying in terms of, it seems to be creeping in terms of scale. I think what I know Mr. Green and I had discussed, it was the idea of understanding our role as the board. And it is a role of oversight. And with that, you need to have understanding of the operations that are going on within the district. It was the spirit in which we were talking about with that, with presentations to give more transparency to your primary directors. The people who report to you could keep us informed of the activities and operations that are going on within their departments so that we have better transparency, so we can give better oversight. That was the spirit of that type of request in terms of a more regular cadence of presentations. So I just want to make sure that there's an understanding of, it wasn't just to get them and parade them up in front of us.
Oh, absolutely.
It was strictly so that we could get, and again, what would be a logical cadence would be hard for us to understand exactly, but be able to give us the insight as to how those are operating, looking at maybe their current activities, the challenges that they're facing, and maybe opportunities that they have in terms of what's going on within those departments. So that's what I thought we were talking about, and when we talked about a board goal, so we can keep our responsibility of oversight, therefore looking into those departments and be able to see that.
So thinking about that, maybe a suggestion that I would make for this coming year, because again, we have 9 directors. If we do 1 director a meeting, we're already at 4.5 months that it'll take us to have all of them. And then that's 4.5 months. And then, there's another 4.5 months. Would it be beneficial, at least for starters, for once school starts, for me to just schedule one of these? Well, I guess it is actually 9 because the finance director is here all the time. So I don't have to schedule that in addition to it. I could start in the fall, run through all of the directors, have them come and do sort of a opening, here's my program, here's what we do, here's our current activities, and then we decide, from that point, do we want to have them come back a second time this year? Would that be helpful?
Mr. Green.
I think that's a good idea. To me, also, is we already have the finance director, the curriculum director, and the HR director that we hear from, I think, on a regular basis. So to me, that's almost, we don't have to add any more meetings from them out of those 3, because we hear from Jerry, we hear from Teresa, we hear from, Jill as needed. It's just the people we haven't heard from.
So I would ask you a few more questions about the HR director. You get an HR report, but I don't know that Mr. Moran has done that many general presentation to the whole board. He certainly is doing that with the Personnel Committee, because that was one of the concerns from the superintendent evaluation, is that we really want to make sure, we want more information about the procedures and the policies of the HR department. So he's been reporting to the committee, but not to the full board.
Madam President,
Sorry.
just to dovetail off of that and to maybe make a suggestion then, what we had done one previous year, Leslie had everyone set up on the calendar that those directors were going to come in. At that time, a week ahead of time, if you had any specific questions, we all emailed them to the president. The president then gave them to whoever was going to be reporting, so that maybe they have a, hey, here's my quick intro, and it didn't turn into a waste of, I'm coming up here, I don't really know, if there were specific questions. And then that way, when it comes around to, do you want to see this person again, and do you have questions again for that person? It meets our board goal because, like we were talking about doing the 2 perception surveys, they come in, when Jason here was talking, I see in my head a logic model. Is kind of like what I want. Is that what you're looking at? Like, tell us what you're working with. Who are you working? What's against you? What isn't? And when we follow back up at the end of the year, hey, how did you do with this? How did you do with this? And what problems are you taking into the summer? So there might be times where we would be able to create, like I know we did for Mr. Brankowski once. Everybody got 2 questions. We looked at them. If they were similar, we removed it. And he came and just presented on those questions, and if anything spiraled out of it. And I feel like that was one of our most effective meetings with the director, because the expectation, there was no we knew exactly what it was. We had these questions, and can you answer it? And he even had a couple pieces of paper for us to look at,
Excel
his little presentation. And then it wasn't like, well, let me scramble and have to give these, well, what are you looking for? We literally wrote this is what we would like to hear about or see, and also what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. So we can do that model again. Neil was here that year. What were your thoughts on us doing it that way?
I thought that was a good model, the way it ran, and it didn't take up too much time, but therefore what Mr. Koopster said, as far as you kind of need to know what all the programs are up against, so we can kind of help steer around that, and so when we set up our budget and we talk about that, make sure that we meet all the students' needs and the whole community.
Maybe an initial presentation of kind of what they're all about for the benefit of those who don't know.
Yeah, the elevator speech,
Yeah.
and then
And
the
then
meat of
follow
it,
up.
yeah. And what was good about that is, if they knew the questions ahead of time, and they say, okay, Jill's really good at keeping time. If we needed to do 3 presentations just to have that open time, and someone comes in and they know, I'm going to tell you 5 minutes about our program, you should kind of really know that by now, but here's the ins and outs, here's what might be changing with our program. These were the questions proposed to me, let me answer them, and then we could have the next person. So instead of doing a 45-minute presentation where we're just getting a bunch of information, some we want, some we don't even need to know, it was way more specific that way. So that model, I think, worked. I didn't think everybody had to be called back a second time. Because the 2 years before that, we had too many. It was too much. We were here till 11:30, 12 o'clock.
I think we had meetings every
night.
week.
Yeah, it was every week, and it was too much. I think it was too much for staff, and we just kept hearing the same thing. Like, if it seemed like someone was doing a presentation, and we just wanted to know specifics.
So I'm going to make a recommendation. If I'm hearing everyone, I could, starting sometime in August, well, no, because our last August meeting is the 15th, and that's before they report back. I will set up a schedule early this fall. I will put a Google Calendar. I will allow these directors to sign up for a time. Once I will suggest that they have a very brief presentation and include just information about what's their department like, what are their current activities, what are their challenges and their opportunities, and then I will give you that schedule so that you would have an opportunity to send questions to the board president, who can forward them to me. However we want to set that up, they'll have an opportunity to have perhaps some questions ahead of time. I will attempt to schedule one every meeting. but just the reminder that at the second meeting of every month, we are currently also having a presentation by Rob Kokoski. He's doing our dashboard, so there's also that in there, and try to, you know, schedule around that, and then I will also consult with Ms. Pastor to make sure that there aren't any other required reports coming up. I will do my best to schedule that, but that's going to take us a good 4 to 5 months just to get through everything, which actually would bring us probably pretty close to the January retreat or February retreat, and then the board could revisit at that time what system you would like going forward. Is that an acceptable plan to everybody?
That sounds good.
I like that.
Okay.
I like it. I'm good with that.
So, real quick before we get off of that topic, because I feel like we're calendar talk now, because I don't see anything specific. When those get plugged in on here, I had for this calendar, this is what we're going into, right?
These are the correct dates for 17-18, but we just pulled over the old information, so the information is incorrect, but this would be the dates as they stand if we continue with the first and third, and I've not looked at this yet to see if there are conflicts with school breaks, or I haven't done any of that work. And before we get too far away, I know there's some interest in talking about programs, making presentations, and I do have some thoughts about that if you desire to come back to that.
Well, if we're already on calendar, I think,
Yeah, we want to tell her how we want it.
yeah, we want to do that.
Okay, so did you want
Oh,
to
for
talk
programs,
about-
there are a lot of programs, and there's a lot of great programs. I don't have any resistance to programs coming and sharing good news with the board. One of the things that has been difficult is JROTC loves to come every year and they want 30 minutes. So I'm not sure if the board wants to set any parameters, but one of the things that you might do is start to compile a list of the programs that you know you would like me to ask to come at some point in time. I sometimes choose, like I asked the PBIS coordinators to come. I asked the watchdogs to come. You know, there's some that I just know, and then there's some that email me and say, can we come? That would be another thing that I think would be most manageable if I had a list and that I could just always work with them and try to plug them in as I could. That would probably take us several years to get through all of the programs if we're adding some of those in, but the board could give me, like, these are our top 10 that we would like to hear from this year, and then again I can just sort of work with groups to try to get them on a board meeting when I know that we don't already have 2 hours worth of work. That was my thought, and how I could accommodate the interest that I know the board has in hearing from more programs.
Is there a way for us perhaps to get the master list of all of the programs? And let's say we did want to hear from JROTC, which, you know, it's always, I mean, they bring in money to us. But then let's say that there's programs like Christian Youth Club, German Club, like we couldn't possibly go, but maybe there's a student rep that would like to come in and take the 2 minutes to explain what they're doing. So instead of this presentation where the whole, like JROT, that's a event almost, you know, they even have honor guard. But maybe just to say, okay, these 10 that maybe don't get heard from, do we have a student that wants to come in and give us their experience in Christian Youth Club or environmental, I don't know what they call it.
Well, now you're getting into clubs, and that's another, that's a third
Yeah,
level.
that's the thing, like, that's
JROTC is.
Because when we hear the programs, the PBIS, and we're hearing, I want to hear, like, the impact on the kids, too. I just don't want to hear this, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, JROTC comes in here, and we hear all about the JROTC. That's really the only time where I hear the kids talk back, and the times that the kids went to France. But I would like to hear some of the clubs somehow get routed in with this too, because that's where the kids are at. You know, the PBIS stuff is great information, but that could be an email or a white page that we all get and can develop questions on. I don't know if that's something we want to incorporate more student.
Well, in any given year, there could be
activities.
30 or more clubs. So I guess give me some guidance, and I can certainly begin to invite some people in for some very short presentations. But I guess my question is, do you want me to start with school-based programs? JROTC is a program because students can participate and earn credit. The Nature Center, there really isn't a program. There is an environmental science class that uses the Nature Center. We don't really have
There's
a
an
person
ecology club too.
in charge of the Nature Center. It's just something that we own.
I think that if the directors that report annually can include some of that, or the school improvement, if they can add a little bit more of that than the regular template, just, yeah, and then I know that one year we had the marching band come in here, you know, and talk about their program.
The directors, looking at these directors, I don't think any of the directors oversee any of those programs that
Okay.
you're talking about.
Mr. Estheimer?
Just a thought from what was already discussed is maybe with the clubs, we're looking at it a little differently, or I'm looking at it a little differently. Maybe we go to them, you know, like they set up open house at the Nature
They
Center and we
do.
tour. You know what I mean? It's specifically for us
They
that we
do
can go
that,
in
but I
and
think
walk
that
it.
it's really good for the parents and the viewers at home to be like,
Sure, but
you
I
know
mean,
what,
when we're
my
talking
kid
about
can be
30
involved
clubs,
with
that's what I
that.
was trying to think. It'd be nice to go see the presentation or something.
Well, we
you know.
haven't had good luck with student reps. Maybe we can do that each.
Maybe in addition to it, or, you know, and some of these things we can just actually put our butts in the seat in these
We're gonna add more
classrooms and see
meals.
exactly what they do on their site. Maybe that would be easier to schedule our time rather than their time.
I think that you had touched on something that I think is a good opportunity as it relates to student reps. And we have that as part of our agenda as it is. I think that time and that space, and maybe providing some direction to the student reps, if we can get ones that are engaged, us giving them direction about, tell us about what not only the activities that are going on within the schools, but also what the activities around those clubs and things like that. I think trying to hear from them at that point might be a spot.
Let me help you a little bit with the history
Sure.
of the student reps, because 3 years ago, for a long time, that was run through student council. And they just, if you were a part of student council, they had a process to pick student reps, and they reported on athletic activities and activities in the school. And then there was an interest in the board to try to deepen the participation for students and to open it up to all students, some of whom might have an interest in the political system or in school board activities. And so we opened it up and we completely changed the process. That first year, there were several highly motivated students who really wanted to be a student rep. They were very reliable. They had great information to report to us. We tried it the second year, and you know what happened. There's no person overseeing them. There's no one requiring them to be here, and they just kind of fizzled at multiple levels. And so I don't know. You know, again, it's the choice of the board. We're sort of back at the, do I go back to student council and give them a different list of questions or information to bring to the board? Do we continue with all kids can apply, and we hope that we get more motivated students next year? That's something that we are pretty quickly going to have to decide about. Or do you want to go in a completely different direction for that time of the meeting?
Can I make a suggestion on that? Because I was thinking about this, and I think that it's frustrating for us when the participation's not there, but it's also hard when you have every Tuesday night if you play a sport or if you're involved in something like that. So how about we do a mashup here? If we know that there's 30 groups, our student reps each will have, or the clubs, will have the clubs, and each club will pull 2 every meeting, 1 member from each. They will tell us, introduce themselves first by their club, tell us what their club is doing. I know that every student rep before the principal at the high school sits down with them and gives them bullet points on what she wants announced at the meeting. So there is that. So then after they tell us a little bit about their club, they can go through what's going on at the school, just like the student reps would if they sat here. There would be more student participation, more kids would get the opportunity, and we would get to hear about a lot more that happens at the schools. That's my input.
I love the idea. I'm not sure who would manage that, because all I could do would be to put it out there, try to find out who the club sponsors are, try to have them sign up and see what kids are interested in, and we get what we get and see how it goes. To ask those students then to report on other activities, I just don't think the kids will follow through with that. I think we'll be lucky we can give it a try and see who shows up, because there really isn't a person that would be overseeing all of that.
Isn't that kind of what we did before and we didn't get any responses?
No, this is different. I'm just saying that if every club has to have a sponsor, which is a teacher, and the teacher can. I don't know why you think that they'd be incapable of telling you what's going on at the school. Just because I'm in Scrabble club or whatever a club is, and I could say, yeah, we do this, or we have this coming up and this, and by the way, prom's coming up and tickets are this much. If they know what's happening in the school, or maybe it's their take on it. I don't think it's too much of an expectation to ask any student what's going on at their school. But
I think the goal here is we have so many great things happening in our schools and the district that people do not know what's happening. So we're just brainstorming right now in this retreat to try to come up with ideas on how we can get that information to us and to the public and to other students who might be interested in some of the clubs who don't know about them.
And I think what Rebecca's saying is because that's already an agenda item, if we were concerned about time with 30 clubs, if they're already on the agenda to have a speech at the end of the meeting, it might be a good way to incorporate them in. But again, who manages that total process? Is it the administrator? I don't know.
send a calendar out and have a teacher sign up.
That would be the way to do it, I guess.
Try it in Google Docs.
And then you have a smaller
I'll give it
pool-
a try.
smaller
If
pool of
you
kids.
want to replace the student rep time with just kind of a rotating number of students, would that be from the high school, the middle school, Asher?
That
Do you want
sounds
me to
good.
just-
I'd like to, because at the end of the year, the seniors are always gone. They're absent for the
And maybe just to
month
make it
or so.
easier, they just have 4 bullet points that they talk about what happens at the school, what upcoming dates, whatever we decide or whatever.
I know a lot of times if my child is going to be here at the board meeting, that brings parents and grandparents in to watch them and to see them on TV. Gives more exposure.
Yeah, and it lets more kids know who we are.
Can we have some, like, principal recommendations at the elementary school, or?
4th and 5th graders might get them on the agenda first, though, so that they can go home and.
Yeah.
Or start up by
I
doing-
agree that I think it should be shuffled, maybe
Yeah.
to the top of the meeting rather at the end of the meeting.
Oh, it would have to replace the student rep time and give them a real tight time limit on what they're
Yeah,
what
2.5
they're
minutes
doing.
each, and
It can't hurt to try, right?
Yeah.
Or have
I think it was a
the
good suggestion, Rebecca.
elementary schools
We'll
like
work
do
on
the
a
Pledge of
plan for you.
Allegiance to start out with.
Oh,
Rotate amongst.
absolutely.
yeah, we were doing that regularly. A kid would come up and lead us into the pledge, and
So I don't think that we really finished the conversation about programs. But maybe we want to table that until February and see how these other 2 new initiatives go.
I thought that you were going to just post the calendar and see who signs up.
Well, that was for the student, the clubs and the student activities.
I thought we were using that kind of as, I hate to say it so honestly, as clubs, programs, student activities, kind of being all
You want
the-
it all in one. Okay.
If we send it out to everyone and we don't get response from everyone, we
Right.
gives
Okay.
us more of an opportunity.
There is no list of all these programs, so please, if any of you have, something on your heart that you would like me to remember to include, please send that to me, because there is no list, and this is going to be me trying to figure out some of this and get information from, administrators and that sort of thing. So this is going to be a work in progress. I'm not sure that I adequately capture all of the things that you would view as a program that you would be interested in hearing. So please let me know. It would be helpful for you to give me some thoughts.
So, and the other thing too is if we have programs that we're interested in, like the band program or JROTC, are they sticking to 3 minutes, or? are they
That was
gonna
my
be-
next question, because there is just no way that the colonel is going to come in. I mean, he would come and do a 3-minute presentation, but that will not take the place of he will request. And that's the other thing, that, at some point, it doesn't have to be necessarily decided tonight. This is at the beginning of the meeting. This will be very time constrained. I'll give them some suggestions, but this will be brief. And it'll be hard the first time we start going through this, because they're going to want to tell us a whole lot more.
Well, I mean, in some programs, it can be a few minutes, but others, like the JROTC, they have the flags, and that's.
They
a-
want
that's a
to impress
program.
us. They want, and JROTC gets a third of the FTE of all the DCTC that comes in, and they're totally self-funded. This budget is the first time I've ever seen anything allocated for them, and it was $600, $900. They do an amazing summer camp program that gets the kids involved, and
That's what he exposes to.
and he
wants us to
he
show
wants
us
the
that.
parents to all understand that, and cadets speak too. So he brings 10 cadets, and they all say what they're getting out of the program, and it's important for other parents or whoever's viewing at home to be able to see that we have an awesome JROTC program here.
Or students who, maybe in the middle school, who want to
Yeah,
join.
absolutely.
Mr. Green?
Just throwing this out there, talking about getting these programs down and about visibility, which is something that we like to talk about. What's the feasibility or an idea that each of us have 1 or 2 schools that we're responsible for, of each of us taking a piece of the pie, and each of us calling the administrator or contacting the administrator at the schools that we represent, we're supposed to represent, and asking them, what's the activities at your school? A, I'm getting to know the administrator a little bit more. B, I have the list of the programs, and then when I get my programs, you get your programs, you get your programs, and talk to these administrators, then we can pass the list off to Ms. Cretia.
If you, Andy, use Google Calendar, you can go on and find any school's calendar and link it to your own. So if I pull my phone up and I pull my calendar and I hit show all, it will tell me everything that's happening at every school in Southgate, whether it's mom-son movie night or the dentist is coming in for whatever. You can see all of those programs. So the calendars are all there. If you link them all together, then you can get an idea of when programs meet where. If that helps you, I can show you how to link those together, and then you can have it all at your fingertips, rather than, because what I'm saying is, if it's me, I'd rather be able to call and ask questions about existing programs than say, what programs do you have, when you could, you go in with a little knowledge, a little information. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just saying, I know what programs are at Grogan for the most part, but I might be missing 1 or 2. I just thought if we each took a piece of the pie and said, okay, here's the programs we have, it would help all of us instead of one person burden, taking the load, that's all. I hear what you're saying. Just a thought.
We can
Anybody?
come back and review that and see what we have.
Maybe we need to put that under our adopted schools
That's what I meant.
when we do our report for our, or at the end. I know,
We do
I
that
think-
now.
we do that now, yeah, so.
But I think the point was to give them an opportunity to present themselves and really showcase themselves, an opportunity in front of the board and the public and attendees here to show that, hey, this is what we do and this is the rewards and values I get out of it. And it really gives them a
I tell you-
spotlight and a showcase of
I
themselves.
tell you what I'm going to do to start with. I'm going to do an all-staff email, and I'm going to describe what the board is interested in, and I'm going to give employees an opportunity to let me know of a program, and that'll be a good way for us to start.
Programmer club.
Yeah.
We can, yeah.
We've had somebody talk about the Downriver Consortium. Who's that person in charge of?
Jason Martin.
Okay,
He's the DCTC principal.
okay. So maybe he can come in and update us
I
on-
have that as a director, as
Oh,
one of the
okay.
director's
Okay.
spots.
He's one of the 7?
9 now.
Okay, okay.
You went through that list really quickly just to make sure I could only write down 4, and now we're up to 9. Could you?
Human
please-
resources,
Got it.
curriculum, finance, food service, special services, latchkey, technology, athletic director, DCTC director.
What about the,
Oh, maintenance.
and alternative and adult education?
Yep, and adult ed. So there's 11.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on reports and programs? Okay, moving on to number 4, district website. We talked about this before, about under the board member's sole individual picture. If maybe you want to show, because I've seen this with other districts where they have listed several options, but either what committees you're on, what certification you have with MASB, what classes you've taken, or what topic you're championed. Because I know there's a district that each board member had something that they followed up on, like bullying, anti-bullying, and things that they really were focusing on. So, and each board member had a different topic. So if you want to see anything under your name like that, like board education, committees, liaisons, do you want any of that under there? Would that be helpful to any of your constituents? This is just something I'm transferring from previous board retreat.
So currently, that's on a different page, right? Like the liaisons and the committees, and you were just suggesting have it all.
This is under the website.
No, I mean, currently, you can't click on our name to find that, but there's a separate
Right.
page. There's 2
Right.
separate pages for committees and liaisons.
Where
You're
the
just
agendas
suggesting you have
and,
it
yeah,
all under our name.
yeah.
That'd be easier to navigate.
I was thinking in addition to that, too, also a bio, like a short little bio, if anybody wanted to write a bio up and have that there, and then maybe contact information, too. How do you want people,
Right now,
to
I
contact you.
believe we have an email, and if you click on it, I think that's the only thing we have, but if you want to add like a phone number,
Yeah, it was just all in that same spot.
yeah.
right,
Okay, so we would want maybe a bio, just whatever you want. If you wanted to add
Yeah.
more committees, okay.
Yeah, that's a good
A
idea.
bio and contact information. Rebecca, Jason?
I'm not sure how much she can add underneath your pictures, but at the very least, she could put some links. I know
Yeah.
that. I don't know if the
Yeah, click on the
bio.
picture to get
Yeah,
the-
so at whatever point all of you get the information to Darlene and she gets it to me, then I'll forward it to the webmaster and ask her what changes can be made.
Okay, to our website, is that agreeable, you guys?
That's fine.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to number 5, and again, this was just a list that I put together from just thoughts and ideas, and it seems like we're back to the same, yeah.
Some of it.
So that was just one of our board goals. We covered that already. So, yeah, we discussed A, B, C. Now, special education, there was some discussion on that. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about. That's part of the director report, I think. That would be something we can discuss with the director. And then again, throughout the year, if there's any questions we have, or students or parent complaints, we just direct them to the superintendent. Any discussion on that regarding special education, any topics or discussion? Okay, so for this one, we're going to go through the director. If we have any questions or forward any comments to the superintendent. Bullying issues, we had an anti-bullying committee. Rebecca, did you have any input on the changes that you'd like to see?
We had a really good meeting last week, I think the three of us, and I think that we're in the stages of carving out. If it hasn't been working, we need to figure out something that will. So as far as that goes, just the committee maintaining, you know, I think we got a good start last week, and we're now working on it as an actual work group to have something to bring back to the board through our reporting. But I think we also talked about, is there a extensive list of the committees now? Do we have this is the be-all, end-all list of committees?
Well, we have our current committees, and the only thing we added was the personnel and the grounds and maintenance committee. So that's what we have right now.
They're all currently listed on the regular board agenda.
Yes.
Looking for that.
Mr. Estheimer?
I have a question from Rebecca. There was some topics discussed, I think that you were involved with on Facebook regarding bullying, and I remember there was something brought up where there was something that, you know, when you clicked on it on the school website, it wasn't bringing the page up correctly. Do you know?
The link was broken, yeah.
Has that been taken care of? Do you
the-
know?
Darlene, when was the last we just checked in that? It was down for about 5 months.
Are you talking about the report that we can access or the bullying policy?
When you went to the website to get the form, when parents went to get the form, the link was broken.
Yeah, and that was several parents chimed in on that.
Yeah.
And also, whatever the standards are at the school, you know, some teacher or some parents said that they asked for it, or
we had
never
parents that
offered
said
it,
that they asked, and the people behind the desk said that they didn't know what they were talking about.
or they didn't offer it when they came in. I just want to make sure that you guys are handling that.
These
committee.
are all
Yeah.
things that we talked about at our last meeting. Darlene and I have been on this board, is it 5 years now? This one, anti-bullying, it's been 5?
That's, I think, 6.
6. And we keep plugging away with this same process, and it's just not working. So we're trying to figure out what will work, and coming up with some different ideas on having it be more visible to be able to speak out, and some more self-advocacy. And then the parents, it's just, because I read that thread, and there are parents that said, I went in, I asked for the paperwork and was told, we don't know what it is. Or the form wasn't readily available, or they filled the form out and then they didn't hear anything back. So that is a concern of ours right now, and we're trying to figure out a new way so that these things don't happen.
All right.
So I would have 2 concerns, and one would be any time that any parent reports that a link is broken, this is the first time hearing of this, I need to know that right away, because that's unacceptable, that
Do we
any
have that
link is
form
not,
online?
it's online in several different areas. And my concern about, if a parent reports that they've gone into an office for something that's an expectation that it be available, I need to know that right away. But I thought Darlene, that during this last year that you had done an audit and checked, gone into the offices and asked, and you had reported to me that,
I
that
did.
it was
and
available and
it was
everyone.
there, accessible, and I, you know,
Yeah,
was.
so any time that any of you get a complaint that something isn't working, it's not accessible, somebody has told them that they don't know what they're talking about, I need to know that right away, because otherwise I can't pursue that. That's unacceptable that anyone would be told at an office that they don't know where the anti-bullying report is.
I think
I'm
also-
sorry, where exactly is that report? Because I tried to look for it online, and I did a search, and nothing came up.
Well, it's a
for
couple
me.
of different places. It's on the homepage is a huge button that says Stop Bullying Now, and if you click on that, it takes you to the links. It is also on the superintendent page. If you go to superintendent office, there's a link there. That's 2 places that I know that it is, and then I'd have to check and see where else it is.
The policy is been confirmed that it is working, so I just wanted to make sure that link was correct.
But we also have been taking a look at the form that is filled out. it contradicts itself. Andy had some really good points on the forms that we reviewed. So we want to take a look at that and kind of recapturing so people understand what actual bullying is. And then there's been times where we have parents who asked that the form be done, filled out, turned in, and it just wasn't.
Right.
If you can't
So-
template certain things because
I don't remember in reading that, and I could be wrong, but I don't remember people saying that they weren't given the form, but I remember people saying that they've made a complaint and weren't offered the form or something like, I don't know, they even know that they could ask
Well, like
for a
I know,
form.
at one of the schools, I had asked for a form I had asked for it to be filled out.
Yeah.
I said, someone was goading my son into committing suicide, and I said, you have to report this. It will absolutely be reported, but it wasn't in the information that came back. So I was shocked by that, so,
Yeah, the
trying
more
to figure
information you can
out-
give us from your committee would be great, because I recently, over the past month, had somebody contact me about a bullying
Mm.
incident, and I just directed them to, actually, I directed them
But
to the
see,
principal, and
the-
then said if you can't,
But
because she was on
here's the
principal.
thing, and what Darlene and I are
vacation.
finding. The more you're out in the community, and I deal a lot with parents, and maybe not all the football players, I deal a lot with on the community service end. And the number one thing they say is, please do not give my name. My kid doesn't want any retribution. I've already dealt with this person and it was terrible. I just want to know what else is there I can do. So that's another thing that's on our agenda is how do we get past over or repair that?
Well, also they should know too, again, the compliance officers are Rob Bolchuk and Mrs. Cretion. So that's another step too. If they find that their principal isn't doing their job or they're not given the report form, they can go to the compliance officers as well. And also, we get a regular report. Is it quarterly that you're giving us the reports or monthly still?
Monthly as the bullying incident
Okay, so
reports come in.
we're getting those, so we can, if that isn't on there, you need to go to the superintendent or Rob and say, well, what's going on, because they're the compliance officers too.
Well, and I think some of the misunderstanding is that, and again, if there's a need to change the procedure, an anti-bullying incident report is not filled out every time that an administrator deals with an issue. That form, as it stands currently, is for a parent or a student who wants to report it separate from just us learning about it, through regular, kids come into the office or there's been a fight, and during the investigation into the fight, a student reveals that they believe that they've been bullied. That information is all housed in the disciplinary referral. So if a parent believes that their child has reported something and that it hasn't been attended to, again, it's easy enough for me. I have access to MyStar. All a board member has to do is call me and have me check a student name, and I can look and make sure that it has been, in fact, reported or investigated. And that's, I guess I agree that if the trust is broken, then we need to repair that. But if a parent comes to a board member and complains about this, I'm not sure, what can a board member do to help them if you're not able to share that information with the people that need to investigate it? Because it's wholly unacceptable that a student or a parent believes that they've reported something and are telling a board member it hasn't been acted on. Unless someone has the ability to investigate that, there is nothing that can ever be, we can't possibly track those down. And I do have parents that call me and say, I'm concerned. I had one just recently, and I shared with them that there's their concern was that, kids were reporting things that we couldn't yet verify. There's a place in MyStar, it's called Visits, where we can keep track of concerns and students so that we can sort of track behaviors and have a body of information about what's going on among kids. And this parent had come in and talked to the administrator and was concerned that nothing was being recorded. And in fact, I went into Visits, I found the information, I shared that with the parent, I said, it's right here, I can tell you which employees have added this information. And that was very comforting to the parent to know that, in fact, that those people that told them that they were recording this and keeping an eye on it, that in fact there was a record of it. So again, if the trust has been damaged, I guess if nothing else, encourage those parents to call me later. I don't have to do anything with their information other than talk to them about what could we do to make you feel more comfortable expressing your concern that something hasn't been followed up on.
Mr. Green.
This is back to where we talked before. Maybe something for Mr. Tashi, something that you might not be aware of, and it's just because we're sitting here together, and from what Ms. Reed had said, on my computer, I can pull up the bullying, and it's a pretty large document. I do know this from the past, though. If parents, which many parents have tablets, like what Dr. Pomponio has, when she attempts to pull it up, it says an error because it's not loading. So maybe some of this discrepancy is that
Yeah.
a computer, an actual computer can pull this up, but a tablet will not because of the,
Well, especially like if you have an iPad and it's a drop-down box, iPads don't always allow for the drop-down menu to come. So I can certainly, you know, again, if somebody could give me a specific example, I would absolutely be happy to forward that to Mr. Tashi, because maybe we need to see if there's another, I don't know enough about technology to know how else you make that accessible to people.
Right.
But I do know that you're absolutely correct. On certain devices, you cannot access all the different areas of our website.
my concern too, may I?
Mr. Green, go ahead.
My concern too with the form, I mean, we're getting into procedures, is that it's a matter of schematics, and I know bullying's a big issue, being a teacher myself, is as I look at the description that we have here again, and I've looked at it before, you know, bullying, harassment, intimidation, it's like 5 different topics. To me, that's still under the auspice of bullying, but a couple of the reports, without violating any laws and stuff, it states the administrator, and this is where something that I think we need to review on the form, is it checks off determined as being harassment, and then the next box is therefore it's not bullying, and they check no. To me, harassment is bullying. So, I mean, I just don't know where that is. That doesn't make sense to me personally, but that's just my opinion on the form. So maybe it's something we have to look at.
That
Or-
form was developed a long time ago, and if it's not clear to
7 years
parents,
ago.
then it's not helpful, and we need to revise it.
Right, that's my opinion.
And then the other thing is too, is coming up with an avenue so that, you know, under when the state first gave us this, it's not just student versus student, but, you know, if a student feels they're being bullied by anyone in the school, or if, you know, a parent feels that they're being bullied by anyone in the school, we have to make sure that we have somewhere that is comfortable for those persons to make those reports, because I think it's better to mend fences than lose students. And that's something that keeps coming up. So.
If I can just make a quick point about technology, there, and this might be something you have to talk to the website administrator about, and it's what Mr. Green was talking about. There is a way, all my websites are all cell phone friendly, you know, where it converts, because right now, just to use ours and to zoom in and click on just to get to the board member topic, you hit 3, it's hard to even get to it. So that would be something that I would hope that we could look into doing. It's not an expensive option.
Well, again,
Skill
as you
set
get,
called Design for Mobile is what it is. It's a
as you
web
get
design package.
concerns, please forward them to me right away. I will respond and I will copy you, you know, on what action I'm taking, so that you have a way to know that I've followed through on it.
Is what I just asked for something you'd rather me send to you, or can you?
I think it's always best if you
That-
send an
okay.
email, because then I
I'll-
have a
I'll
record
follow
of
that
it,
up. Okay.
and then when I respond, I copy you on the response. That's how I keep track of.
Unless it was a resolution, this is the better channel to go? Okay, perfect.
And just while we're on this topic, Madam President, what is the procedure for if we have a parent who follows the chain of command, they follow the protocol, and they still are dissatisfied or feel that they weren't heard or for any reason. I mean, that's the reason why people come to board members. There's not very many people I talk
But
to who come right to the board.
The people that are coming to you are also saying they don't want their names given. People come to me and say, you know, I don't want to give my name, and then that puts me in a position
Oh, no,
where.
I can pass it on to you. They don't want to have to deal with the administrator who was maybe hurtful to them.
Then
Or
it should always go to Leslie, because she, you know, and if it doesn't go anywhere with Leslie, then the next step is the board.
Okay, so what do we do for those people?
We need to get their names, make sure that we save their names on a list, and then we'll forward it to her, and then we'll check up and make sure that she's following through on that. If there's nothing that's done on that part, then we gotta discuss it in the committee, and we gotta follow through on that, because it's important.
So
If it comes to me and I deal with a parent and they're not satisfied, then they would need to contact a Board of Education member and say, I've met with the superintendent, this was the resolution, and I'm not satisfied. At that point, then it does come to the board, and then there's many, many different scenarios depending on how they would come to the board to ask for resolution. That's where it gets tough, because those typically are in an open meeting. So.
Okay, so the names that you have.
The
forward
list
that-
I've given it to you.
Send it to me again, because I didn't get it. I just got one person on Facebook. If you can send me the list, I will forward it to Mrs. Creation and Leslie. I'll follow up with you. You know, maybe, you know, you can tell me how much time, a couple of weeks, and then we'll keep that communication open
Okay.
and have it reported to the anti-bullying committee as well. But I need to see the names too. I'm sorry, Rebecca, I didn't get the email, but I want to see the names so I can reach out too.
I feel like I give them to you often.
I know, you keep saying that you're giving them to me.
I
and I'm
have,
not
I
getting it.
mean, we can go back through the text. I have when I cut and paste and say, can you
That
talk
one I
to?
have.
Or
I
when I
have
add you to a conversation, but the problem is, they want to know what the board does if we're rerouting them back to where they felt they were off put.
Okay, so that's what's going to have to happen
Okay.
with the names, and then we'll just have to follow up with Leslie. And we'll talk about it further in the committee.
Dr. Pomponio, kind of alludes to this, but do we do like an exit survey with parents, like people that have been frustrated, that say that they're moving their children to Wyandotte or Trenton or other districts because problems haven't been resolved? Have we found out any of that information on why they have moved? Or are those parents the ones who just are frustrated and say, I'm done, and
What we have found in recent history is that parents just go, and then we don't know that they've left until we get a request for records. There's very few parents that come in and say, I'm going to transfer my student. Typically, the parents that come in and say, you know, we're moving, and we have not done exit interviews with those people.
there've been, some people have already said that they're so frustrated they're moving out, and I'm asked them why, and they're like, I'm just done.
We
And-
did that 2 summers ago, and we took the names of every student who had exited in the past year, and we had a phone list, and the administrators volunteered to come in, and we spent hours making phone calls. I have those numbers. A lot of the numbers had been disconnected or had no voicemail, and so we don't know. That was when we were concerned that people were leaving because there was no buses, because we had reconfigured the district. I have the information of the answers that we got. There weren't very many that shared with us anything other than, we're moving, we got another job. There were, and I'm doing this from memory, there were quite a few that were concerned about the reconfiguration of the district. They didn't move because they had experienced something bad. They were afraid, that they were anxious about larger class sizes. We didn't want to have to switch schools, but they were switching schools anyway. We have not done that kind of a survey since then.
The
Talked like
ILDT.
4 years ago.
That was the summer of
13.
14. That was my first
Oh.
summer.
Correct.
It was right after I was hired that we did that. And that, you know, those were our findings. We have a very difficult time even getting parents to come in and do any kind of withdrawal paperwork, much less, you know, do an exit survey. I think if that was something that was a goal of the board for the superintendent, then that would certainly be something that we could attempt to do again next summer at the end of the year to contact. That information technology can pull for us any student that exits, and then if we get a request for records within a certain amount of time, we know. So like the students that had exited and we got a request for records for Texas, we didn't call them because that was we thought was pretty obvious that they had, for whatever reason, had moved out of the area. But certainly that's something that we could do again if the board, you know, and I've made this suggestion a couple of different times that in totality, as you develop your list of concerns, it's helpful to give me some goals for some things that you would like to see developed in the next year.
Was that the ILDT committee that did that work?
No, that was me and some volunteer administrators.
Okay, because that was done in the ILDT, I think in 2011 too. And that just reminded me to the board, the superintendent does need some post-evaluation goals. Based on her effective rating, we need to establish some kind of direction for her and goals. So we'll work on that. I'll put that on a work session in the near future.
I will resend the goals that you had previously approved, and then you can compare those to the areas of the evaluation, and before I do any tweaking of those goals, you could weigh in.
Update, yeah. Thank you.
Madam President, while you just had brought up work session. Is anything, because I didn't see it added onto this at the last minute, is anything going to be changing with going back to those work sessions with our meetings?
Actually, I think okay, yeah, that wasn't maybe under board role, but yeah, let's talk about that as far as the agenda and how we switched it. Tim, I know you talked about how it's working with the having the work stuff, everything, the way that we changed it before the action item. So we kind of touched on this a little bit in the policy committee meeting. So one of the things that we wanted to touch on here is the way that the board agenda is currently. Is everyone happy with the amount of time that we're given, the information, how we're discussing the action item content before the action approval? Is that good? The work sessions, do we need to keep the work sessions here on camera or in the caucus room? Does anyone want to open that discussion?
I'm with yeah, if I can.
Mr. Cooper.
When there was the arrangement of the agenda earlier in the year, allowing for citizen comments and input prior to action, I thought it was a good a good change to help us make more well-informed decisions. But other than that, I'm pretty good with it. So
Okay.
including that, I'm good with it. Not
Okay.
other than
Okay. Thanks. Mr. Eisheimer?
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm happy with the way that it's progressing. I remember just, you know, being in the audience and just really only hearing from the secretary and the president in most meetings, and then, you know, and then you the 2 cents at the end, or in my case, a quarter. But I'm happy with the way that it's going right now.
Okay. Neil, do you have any input on?
No, I think it's more transparent, and the work sessions, we did talk and got a lot done, but people in the viewing audience did not see that. It was like almost, when we came up here, rubber stamped. Everyone, yes, 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 is way vote. And it's more transparent now in what people say and our thought processes.
Okay. Rebecca, did you have any input?
I think it is more transparent, and I like that about it, but it's not the same. And the new board members don't have the luxury of being able to compare the two. It's not the same. The work that we did during work sessions before, it seemed like there was more discussion. It seemed like it was more real discussion. People weren't afraid to
Speak on camera.
speak their mind on things. It was not like we're sitting in this line. We sat and looked at each other and had conversation, and we worked on things. So I miss that, and there seems to be a big change with that not being a part of the process any longer. It feels like we're missing doing a big part of the work.
Mr. Green?
I see validity in both points. I mean, I can only speak for myself. If anybody has ever watched me knows that I'm not afraid to speak my mind. So, if I'm out here speaking, I'm fine. I can't speak for what Ms. Reed is saying on the inside. I understand what she's saying, that I haven't seen that portion of it. So I can't comment on that. She has a valid point on that. But, you know, for me, the way it's working out here is okay. I mean, I'm good with it, I guess. I don't know.
And we did have somebody approach us the other day and tell us, you know what, I like that you guys don't always agree, and they could see both sides of the argument, but in the end, you could see how you came to that decision. And I sort of like that as far as transparency goes. It allows you to see them making the wine, so to speak.
So we had this discussion a couple days ago, and I can see both sides where, being on the board with different board members throughout the years, there's a difference sometimes when you do a roundtable discussion and you're just kind of working on things and you're just kind of working on as a group. In other districts, Taylor, Lincoln Park, they have separate days so they can do that. And they do get a lot done. I've heard positive feedback about, you know, what they do, what they accomplish. They come in casual and they just hash it out, okay? So that's one point. And as a business model, that's something it's casual and you have a different feel, different psychology there. But coming into before cameras and everything, there's a difference there. But for me, you know, I guess if it's, you know, as long as it's open, I'm comfortable either way because I can be open. Either way, I just, you know, hope that the board can be as open and comfortable in front of the cameras as they would be out there in the caucus room.
What about if when we break for work session, instead of staying in this mode, we sit at a working table?
I don't have a problem with that.
And it is.
It makes
you
a
know,
difference.
It
It
does.
just makes a difference.
There's
I
just
don't
a
know.
different the feel.
Different feel.
Yeah.
Let's sit right around here.
Neil?
I'm just going to say I'm casual today because I came from coaching my daughter's
It's
softball game.
usually
And I had to
casual.
come right over here and had to leave them, and
Neil, it usually is casual. We don't usually dress
I
like
usually don't have a hat and
I didn't
shirt.
wear a jacket.
Yeah, there you go.
You're representing parents.
You look good. You look good, buddy.
Thank you.
I'm not opposed to trying another way, that's fine. Understanding of what the objectives are in work sessions and what the point, the reason for the meeting, if you will, the reason for the work session, I help drive productivity, I think will make them more productive. A lot of times it's a topic. It doesn't really say what the decision that we're trying to get to, not to say decision, but it's usually a topic on the agenda. It's mainly a topic of discussion, but I think that they could be more productive, and I'm willing to do it this way or sit down there or go in the caucus room. I don't really care, but I think that we could be more productive in terms of, do we have the materials that we can reference? Do we have the point we're trying to drive to? What is the sides of this argument that we need to talk out? And having those objectives as part of the work session, I think would make it for a more productive effort, that's all.
And previously, when we had the work session information before we voted on it the next week, we had different thoughts on that. And then a board member brought to my attention a couple days ago, after we had a discussion for the budget and then we voted on it, I'm so busy working on what the next topic is and what we're speaking of at that time that she brought to my attention, well, wait a minute, what about this? After the fact, you know, there's things that you think about. Because when you get the information Friday, you're with your family, then Monday, you're asking, if you got to ask questions, and then Tuesday, we have the meeting. Sometimes even that discussion is limited. So to have it before, that's one of the changes we made where we discuss everything before we actually vote on it. So if we discuss it before, I don't know if you want to change that format instead of right when the action is, I don't know.
Well, and I just do want to make the point that the Google folder is available before Friday. I know that that was a concern, that you didn't get it until Friday afternoon, and then you had to spend your weekend reviewing the materials. So as much as I have been able to, and it's always a goal to get it to you sooner and sooner, there is a Google folder with the information several days before Friday. My goal has been to try to get it to you with at least as close to a week to review as I possibly can.
So I think for now, what we can do is we can try the different spot round table first. We can see how that works
A
out.
little less formal, a little informal.
Yeah, a little bit more relaxed, and then we'll come back and vote on it. So we'll try that process, and again, review what we're doing in another couple months, or maybe at the organizational meeting. Or if you guys don't like it, we can always have the option to switch it back. So that's what we'll do at the work.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You still want this to be on tape, correct? If you're sitting at this table, we'll have a problem with listening to you, because we'd have to have microphones around this whole table. Because even now when presentations are done, if someone's moved away from the microphone, Luke can't hear it. So I don't know, we'd have to consider that if you want it to still be filmed. Do you want people to hear what you're saying? You'd have to be mic'd down there.
Luke, that one mic in the center wouldn't pick up everybody around that table, you don't think?
The one mic will not pick up more than 2 people.
Okay.
If you're sitting directly where those 2 blue chairs are diagonally, that's about as much as it'll pick up. If you do any other chairs, you're gonna have a second or third mic needed.
Is that excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Fine.
Is that available to us through this,
That I do not know, I'd have to
Okay.
check into that.
Okay.
We can just see how it works.
For
As
extra
long as we
mics down there,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's extra mics available to us or
Maybe a
not.
cost that we would have to get.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just try it out and see how it works out, I suppose. As long as we take active minutes from that meeting.
Okay, so we're still going to have the discussion before the action item. That's all fine with you guys? We're going to do that, so we'll just move down there and then come back up, and if we have a problem with people complaining that they can't hear, that's going to be an issue.
No, I'm
no,
sorry,
no.
I misunderstood. I thought it was only
The
the
work
work session,
Work session.
not discussion
Not the
before action
discussion.
items.
Work session.
So do you want to move down next week on the 18th before we investigate whether or not we have additional mics? Because it will not get recorded.
Let's hold off until we can find out if we can be heard.
Get some information?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
sorry.
Thank you.
I just don't want us to go back and forth for
And
reaction.
Madam President, before we get too far along, we do need to double check the dates on this.
Okay.
2 notifications.
Are we just trying to test the microphone?
No, you and I need to work on trying to investigate whether or not we can get additional mics.
Okay. Because at the end of the meeting, you could all just sit down there while it's recording and then view it afterwards. While we're already here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again, Luke? I'm lost.
He asked us to go
One
down.
mic, we can test it after we're done here,
Okay,
but that's to test, we're still probably gonna have to look into more mics.
perfect, okay. Thank you. Okay, Leslie? did
And
you-
I did not bring, these are the dates as they stand. There was some discussion, and I don't remember if it was all of the current board members, on whether or not you wanted to make a big shift away from the first and the third. I think at one time we looked at second and fourth and found almost as many conflicts with the second and fourth Tuesday in the month as the first and third. But these are the dates that we would have for the upcoming meetings for this school year, and I have not yet checked them against the calendar. So I don't know. In the past, we just people pulled up the school calendar and did it right here. If you want, if you want me to do that and send it back out to you and make some adjustments.
3rd, Easter is early this year, or that'll be on Easter break.
Okay. And I don't know do you have midwinter break? Does anybody have the calendar up?
Where's it at on the main page? Oh, okay.
I think most midwinter breaks are 3rd week, 2nd week, and the only meeting,
It's the 20th. The 20th would fall during
would be
midwinter break.
midwinter break, yeah, so that might be the 3rd conflict.
Which month?
February.
February 20th.
So those are 3 that I know we typically have to check. The 19th is okay. That's not the start of Christmas break in December.
Not for my district. I don't know about.
No, it's
Okay, well,
worse.
are you
Yeah.
on the county calendar?
Yeah.
We were, but we
Oh.
didn't follow it this year.
And I don't know about, we sometimes move June because of a variety of events. Trying to think of other days that we've had to move.
Do you do one on Election Day in November? Because I think that's Election Day.
That is election day. the
That's
7th.
election day. So there's 4 already that we have to move. I know that September 5th is the first day of school, but I already have things that I think we
We
need to
always
do
come.
that, so I think we're just gonna have to bite the bullet and have a board meeting
Yeah, we always
that
do
night.
I think the biggest concern was the summer months and different,
Well, the holidays.
yeah, well, for the 1st and 3rd.
The summer, I'm trying to remember before construction, there's going to be very little construction next summer. One of the bigger challenges over the summer has been stuff coming up with construction, so to try to cancel meetings very far ahead of time, then if something comes up for construction, then it's hard to get you to add a meeting in later. I don't know what your druthers are in terms of really July, and I don't know about August. We really would have to, we could look at the whole calendar of what we typically have to bring to the board and see if there was any interest in attempting to consolidate a bit.
So what's besides, which would be Christmas area, the 2nd meeting in December, it seems like there would be less conflicts if we went to 2nd and 4th Tuesdays. You're not going to have a conflict in February for midwinter break. You're not going to have a conflict for Easter in April. You're not going to have a conflict for the board meeting in November. You're going to, you know what I mean? I mean, that's the way it looks like just from the naked eye, besides what would be the 4th Tuesday in December. Seems like there would be less conflict going 2 and 4 than 1 and 3.
Without looking at the whole calendar, I mean, Christmas and Thanksgiving are sometimes a problem.
Thanksgiving's still going to be the Tuesday before. You'd still be here.
And the first Tuesday in July is a problem typically too, because of the holiday.
I don't remember if that's a board policy that we have them. Something tells me that it's in a board policy, the 1st and 3rd, but I'm not sure about that. If we need to,
I don't think
you
it
don't think
is.
so?
No,
Okay.
because when we reviewed it, we left that open because it was so different back then. We had meetings every week. We had it the 1st and 3rd, and then we had it the 2nd, depending on what was, we had a lot of meetings.
So if there's an interest in changing, we could get this on an agenda and then determine the month in which we would change to the 2nd and 4th. I don't think it interferes with anything citywide because their meetings tend to be on Wednesdays.
Okay.
I have all Tuesdays available, so it doesn't matter to me.
I'm just saying, it looks like there's 4 conflicts on 1st and 3rd, and maybe if Ms. McLaughlin's right about 4th of July week being in the middle of the week here and there, it looks like there's only 2 conflicts on 2nd and 4th. I mean, my computer's uploading, so I don't have a,
For the year?
for the year, right.
Well, December, the second and fourth are gonna be a problem.
Well, I would second.
Well, the fourth would.
Fourth would. That's what I said. The second Tuesday in December would be a problem, and the first Tuesday in July compared to, so that's only 2 conflicts if we move to 2 and 4, compared to Election Day, midwinter break, Easter,
and Christmas vacation.
and Christmas, yeah, and so,
Okay.
Christmas vacation.
Okay, so if it makes more sense then to do it the second and fourth, we can do it that way. And if we have to shift around, we can do that too. We have to move it, you know, for.
I mean, that's how I'm looking. I don't have a calendar up. I'm just asking if
Yeah,
that
I'm
looks
trying to look
normal to
at
you
that
guys.
I'm fine with that. If
If
there's.
that's the consensus, I can put that on the 18th, well, maybe not the 18th agenda, because we're concerned that we barely have a quorum. You tell me, I can put it on the 18th, I can put it on an August meeting to vote on switching it to the second and fourth, and then to determine what month you would want that to start, because we would need a little bit of notice.
I'm trying to look at the calendar.
Okay, the first week of August probably, because there's gonna be so many board members, there's a quorum, but
Okay.
let's hope everybody's okay.
Is that the, is that the
Is that
consensus?
okay with everyone?
Dr. Pomponio?
Yes.
The board policy says the board shall hold a meeting at least once each month on a date and a time and place determined annually by resolution
Okay.
of the board.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if that's consensus.
Okay, Rebecca, yes or no?
That's fine with me.
I'm indifferent, so it's easier.
How,
That's fine.
whatever's easiest.
Okay, I'm fine with it.
Okay, so I will put
Angie.
that as an action item, and then if you act on that on August 1st, when would you want that to become effective? For the month of September?
Yeah, yeah.
24, 10/24, nothing in October. So you're gonna have,
Would be good.
yeah, no, I'm looking at November. November's the 14th, 28th, so you're gonna clear,
26th.
you'll actually be after Thanksgiving on the 28th, so November should be fine. So our issue would be, obviously, the day after Christmas, December 26th. That would be one.
What we could do for December is schedule the second and third, and then hopefully be able to cancel the third if we don't need it, to have back-to-back meetings.
And I don't have our calendar up. When's our midwinter break? In February?
The week that includes the 20th,
The weekend of the 20th?
yeah.
So we
it's
would actually clear that. So we go 13th, 27th, so we'd be past that. 13th and 27th in March. And then if we go the 10th, that would clear Easter this year, because Easter's early.
Well, we're not Easter, it's not surrounding Easter, it's the however many weeks.
Well, it's the Easter
This
falls
week.
with.
This
Oh,
year.
this
This
year
year
it will
it
be.
lines
This year,
up.
Easter
Yes.
falls on the same.
On the right
first
week.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's one and the same this year. In the May, so, I mean, it seems to be less conflicts going 2 and 4. There's 2 conflicts instead of 4.
Okay. I will put that on the August 1st agenda.
And of course, that may ripple across committee meeting.
Sure, might have to
So,
change
take a
some
look at
committee
some of those.
meetings
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
because we meet usually before.
That may change some of the district committee meetings too, but that gives us plenty of time to make those adjustments.
Right.
Okay, and again, for board members, if you can just make your Tuesdays available, that would help too.
So I will tell you that if we make this change, I will probably be requesting an earlier meeting in September or the end of August, because I think we're going to have a request for a reinstatement hearing.
Okay.
Although if I do it at the end of August, we have a reinstatement committee, I could actually have them hear it and then just bring it to the board for action, so that might work out okay. All right.
Okay, moving on to number 6, strengthen board goals. You've had your goal list, and it's in the minutes as well. Are there any other discussion on goals that you want to add, or do you want to save that for another time?
Question, and
Scripps?
I mean, I know that we provided goals to you, and maybe I missed something. I didn't, don't remember us ever narrowing down, picking our top favorite 3 or 4, and therefore those are the ones that we, maybe, did I miss something?
We did.
Sorry.
And it's
Okay.
in the minutes.
Thank you. Okay,
But I didn't know if,
Here or not, but yeah, we did kind of vote
Yeah.
on.
okay. I need some minutes to read it. so
yeah, that's what I was
fine.
going to try to look up. But
Sorry.
I'll look at, I'll send you a copy of that.
I retract everything I just said. Thank you.
So is there anything pressing that you want to add to our goals, or is it good as it is, and we'll just review it?
Accomplish some of those tonight.
Yeah. Okay, and number 7, committees. Usually we'll review the procedure of the committees, or if it's working. So we have the curriculum committee that was stopped for a while, and we reopened that one, and that's basically because we're reviewing the materials in the district, the life of the class textbooks. So that's been, Jill's been kind of a co-chair on that, so she's been helpful in giving the information on that, and that's relevant to finding out where, what the status is for textbooks and materials and what we're using in the district. So that's reopened for a good reason, so that's what that purpose is. Policy, as you can see through the several updates from the board, that there's been some needed review, and actually for the 2-year review, we've completed that, but there's always some things that we need to review as we go through our board business. So that's the function of the policy that's been since we've been on the board. Anti-bullying, that's been several years, and that's to keep that topic alive so that parents and students know our main concern is the students, and that we do know that there are concerns out there and some issues, and that we want to stay on top of that bullying issue because it extends to cyberbullying and many other harassment issues and complaints that we want to tackle as best as we can as we get the complaints, and do the best that we can with that. So Rebecca, Andy, and myself have been on that, and we're keeping that topic moving forward. Personnel, you want to talk about what's that?
The personnel committee started, reestablished or established, I think has been very productive. We met today. Mr. Moran has been absolutely outstanding in providing us with information about processes that the HR department uses. Mr. Estheimer and Dr. Pomponio, I think, would agree that, and I hope Mr. Moran would agree that the 3 meetings we've had since he's attended the meetings has been extremely productive for the 3 of us to see the procedures and where we're at, the updates of what's going on, you know, the layoffs to come, you know, who's coming back, where we're structuring people, where some of the decisions this board has made with the addition of classes, how that is progressing with the teachers being pulled from the to fill those places, and the PNPs, and you know, again, you know, if everything, you know, at this point we're at 1.5 teachers that we haven't recouped out of the ones that were let go under the delusion of that agreement, which, you know, may become almost 0 depending how things work. So very pleased with the transparency that Mr. Moore has presented to us, that we can share with the board at any time, and the documents that we have. I think it's extremely productive. To keep with the theme that I think one of our main themes is transparency in a lot of ways, I couldn't be more pleased as the chairman of that committee with how things are going. Mr. Estheimer, Dr. Pomponio, you can, you know, if you have anything to add, please feel free.
No, I think you covered it.
And I think that as a board member, I've been on the board for, I guess, 8-9 years, that I don't know everything, and each board member learns as they go, and you can take classes and you can ask questions, but being here part-time, you learn as you go, and I've learned a lot through curriculum with Jill's hands-on approach, and with students coming to committees and getting different perspectives, even getting out there in the public. But with the HR director, first time in years, I've felt like he's given us willingly forthright information about processes. The superintendent can only do so much, and we can only ask so many questions and with the turnover, but just knowing the processes he brought to us about one piece at a time, staffing, it was just great information that we can learn little by little. Thank you. So that was great for that personnel committee. The legislative committee, Rebecca?
We met again last Thursday, and I think that's it's a good committee. Obviously, it's something that we need to move forward, and starting to look at the idea that these sunsetting of policies happening and a lot of it coming to fruition. I hope that we are heard when we give information or updates at board meetings, but it's a crucial committee, and it's important that we stay as far ahead of it as we can to know how to best plan for our district.
Thank you. And the other building grounds and maintenance that hasn't started yet. But overall, the committees that we have are recommended, and other districts have these types of committees just to get the information through, to discuss it at a more personal level, and have the less of a workload for the superintendent. And again, with all the questions that come up in the finance committee, Mr. Koopser.
Sure. Thank you. In terms of since review committees, and maybe just for the other board members to understand how this committee operates, and Dr. Pomponio, Mr. Craig, myself, Mrs. Cretion, and Mrs. McLaughlin are the members of that committee. That begins with identifying topics of discussion during the committee meetings. There are really three ways in which we're going to be doing that. One is identifying calendar-related topics, such as things for our budgets, review of budgets, final budgets, audits, as well as any, and those are really the calendar-driven type of items. Additionally, now with the new direction with the committee is the ID budget items of interest that we want to deep dive on, and then soliciting topics from committee members. There are some things that come up, be it leases, be it concerns from any of the committee members, and those become items on the agenda itself. The way we operate is that I, the treasurer, create the agenda and send it to the committee. I'm also responsible for running the meeting. It's a standard agenda with a commencement, noting the time, taking roll of attendance, old business, new business, and adjournment. And then at the end of that, I'm also responsible for capturing minutes and distributing that back out to the committee. So that's basically how we've been operating. I think that's a productive way. It makes sure that we don't lose anything. And then it's reported out at board meetings as to the topics in which we covered. A lot of the times we talk through some issues and issues of concern, and those help fuel some of the discussion that we have here within the board and what is being presented by Mrs. McLaughlin. So I find that that's the way that the committee's been working and the work that we've been doing. Anybody else on the committee want to add any?
Did you have anything?
I have one comment about committees in general. Just a reminder that we've been advised that we should treat committees like an open meeting, and an agenda should be posted ahead of time, and there should be timely minutes submitted that we can put on the website for all of those committee meetings.
Okay, I was going to mention that, and also each committee, I know that there was discussion before a year or two ago about the finance committee being different and not reporting to us. That's no longer the case. So we have the committees for transparency reasons, for informational purposes, and so each committee should be acting the same with the agenda, minutes, and no decisions are made in any finance or any committee. So that's the way it's going to be consistent with all committees. And again, each committee should have an agenda what I have, I'll send to you, Teresa, as soon as I can. But just a reminder for the chairs, just to send your committee members and Teresa your agendas and minutes. So that's all. Mr. Eisheimer, do you have something?
I just had a question that I understand the purpose and I agree with it for the grounds and maintenance, but I can't remember if that committee has been officially established yet?
I formed it, we don't have any meeting set up yet.
All right, because I'd like to participate in that.
I'm going to be setting that up, it's just that there's been so many busy things.
Right, all right, because that's something I think that we should get, now that all this construction and everything's going on.
Oh,
It would probably be a good
absolutely.
idea to involve Nate Lay, I believe his name is, and Rob, maybe perhaps to
Yeah.
attend some of these meetings. So I'm anxious to get started on that whenever.
Yeah, that's what I figured, because we've had emergency situations in the buildings. That way I figured that information can go to us and we can track
I mean, I
that.
just toured all the schools yesterday, and with all that work going on, it'd be nice to have a little bit of insight/oversight. So-
Just as a point of clarification, I don't know that we would consider Rob a standing member of a board
No.
committee
No,
because
but
he
if you can
works for a
invite a
plant.
member to
Yeah,
come, fill us in.
at times. And I did share a concern with Dr. Pomponio, that when that committee gets started, that I will sit in on the beginning to kind of get some information from the board as to the type of information that you might want. Nate is a director, but he's a little different than the other directors in the fact that he does not have any support personnel. He doesn't have access to an administrative assistant, and he actually works on the equipment and doing the maintenance in addition, so his time is much more limited. So I'll sit in, at least initially, until the committee establishes its goals and the kind of information that you'd like to gather.
Sounds like the committee might be helpful towards him to help him out. so.
That would be nice, yeah.
And then also, all the committees are, the superintendent has a standing invitation to each and every committee.
And
So-
tell me when you want me to attend, because I couldn't possibly attend all
Right.
those committee meetings.
Okay, so I want to go back to board goals. Our tentative, so I guess we didn't firmly state that these are our goals, but our tentative board goals are process and procedures, visibility in the community, research, transportation, and increased marketability. So if we can have that pushed to maybe a first or second meeting in September on a work session, we can review that, and if there's any changes or additions to that, we can talk about it at that point. So, here's the list.
Thank you.
Any discussion on board goals or any more on the committees? Okay, moving on to millage discussion. Mr. Green, did you want to start that one?
Sure. I guess where I've always been with this is, I know we don't know with the state of what we're doing here and there. Where, do we know where we're at? What do we have available with the millage for the 17-18 year? Or do we know when that's going to be updated to the point of we know?
Oh, I believe,
Answer to it, but
yeah,
we
because that
talked
was
about
on
it in
our
the last
agenda
budget,
for.
on the last board meeting, we talked about that in our budget, and all millage spending would be currently a suspension as it relates to, we were in the black by about 150K, I thought, as it related to the budget itself, not knowing where some of those items were. And that took into consideration the millage because we didn't know exactly some of the funding sources. So it was at that point when we approved the budget, it was a foundational budget, of course, but we can talk about possibilities as we find answers to those funding sources to see if there's availability that the millage dollars don't need to cover. I don't know if that's a fair statement of how I'm portraying what we talked about when we talked about the last budget meeting.
Well, I know that we also intended in the Finance Committee to start the dashboard, and that was going to be on our agenda for whenever our next meeting is, to try to actually get that dashboard up and running and on the website when the webmaster returns. And so that, I want to say we have a later in July meeting, I believe.
26th, is it? Is it the 26th?
Yes.
Okay.
So there were things that were earmarked within the budget itself that were millage spends that will be on the dashboard. And then there's going to be a spot on that which will say unallocated, and that'll tell you how much could be available if all the funding sources came in, and that the full millage amount would be available off of the general fund. So that's the way I don't know if that's making sense, Ian?
It does, it's somewhat frustrating. I mean, I know it's not your fault, it's not anybody's fault here, you know, but, we pass a millage, we spend a lot of money on the millage, I understand that, but I still think there's a lot of money. People are looking at numbers and asking, you've done this, this, and this, what else is there, and what else are we gonna do, and until we get answers from the state and this and that, it's kind of like throwing darts blindfolded at a board. I get it, I do, I get it, and just when that becomes available, I'm assuming that we're going to get updated as it becomes available, and then we'll have a better picture of where we're at as it unfolds.
I can assure you that as soon as the governor signs a budget and we know what we're working with, that one of the very first things that the finance department starts to do is plug those figures in and get a more accurate sense of where we are budget-wise, and, are we over, are we under, do we have to reduce in some areas, but again, until the governor signs that, I guess that was our point at the budget hearing, that we feel it's not fiscally responsible to start making decisions. It's sitting on the governor's desk, but if the governor chooses not to sign it, then I don't know where we are.
And I understand.
Mr. Green, if I can, to your point, though, I think that, and I'm hoping it's not an exercise in futility, that we can still prioritize things in terms of, if we had opportunity, which direction could we go in at that point once we've had those questions answered.
Right.
And I think that we could still do the work for that. And because I want to believe that, I'm an optimist, I don't know, that we might have that opportunity.
We're putting trust in.
That's a possibility that we could leave the millage money as a standing work session. And I've given you some pricing on some information. That could be, we spend some time talking about, of this list, what are the first 5 things that we want the district to try to address. And if one of those 5 things I've not yet gotten you pricing on, then you would direct me and I would get that pricing. I guess that was my request a while ago, because when we have the answers and we're ready to spend, it will go much more quickly if I know the order in which the board would like to try to address some of those issues.
So that perhaps, or not perhaps, it probably should be added to a work session soon for us to make some decisions.
Well, if she keeps a standing work session, we can keep touching on the priorities.
And I can look at the whole list and then maybe the board behind it, such as like bringing up like the field house. I mean, they did some fundraising themselves. That's an important factor as it relates to, could that be a priority, or could a swaying decision? Is it
bathrooms?
This is just a need, bathrooms, things like that.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I won't start that on the 18th because of we know that that's going to be probably a small, or do you want me to start it, to try to start it? I'm going to tell you that it's going to be hard for me to get it updated on the 18th. I could start on August 1st. It's a standing work session item. I will get whatever additional updates to that list that I have not yet plugged in. So every meeting you will get that list and pricing, and that'll be a standing work session, and then the board can begin to plug away on prioritizing.
That sounds good.
Sounds good. I'm happy with that.
Okay, any other discussion on any of the board retreat items, any additions, and any discussion on the millage?
Can I ask for one as it relates to our monthly board sheets that we turn in saying as to what meetings we attend?
Okay.
Is it possible I can get that in a Word document?
I just requested.
Sorry. Okay.
I'm going to send it to Dr. Pomponio in the morning.
We're thinking the same.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just because, I have to print it, then I have to scan it, then I have to write on it, then I have to put it back in, then I email. It's like, if it's just one, I could just do it right then and there. And
You do what I do, Tim fills mine out and gives it to me.
Thanks.
I got a whole stack of them right here.
Neil, that reminds me, I need yours.
Operationally.
I need it soon. She's got to report it for the end of the month.
I need June.
Okay.
I think I turned it in at the end of last month.
Yeah, you did.
Yours is fine. I just have to have, gentlemen, don't leave, I have to have you sign, initial your forms that you turned in.
Then just Jason, if you want to reach out to him too.
I'm sorry?
Jason, we're missing his.
Actually, I talked to him this afternoon.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's going to send it to you.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
okay.
You're gonna
Have a
test
good
us
night.
out?